This might just be the most highly requested technique analysis video I've ever done. Yes, it is Craig Richey from the UK, one of the world's most popular and famous YouTubers in the CrossFit space. Craig has trained with every person under the sun when it comes to the CrossFit world, and he's inspired thousands and thousands of people around the world to either take up CrossFit or pursue their fitness journey, and is a hugely influential bloke in this scene. So I know Craig personally. We've spent training together way back when he first started to learn Olympic weightlifting. We actually did a really cool YouTube video, which I'm going to pop a link to here in the description, which you can go and check out, where I actually taught him how to do some of the foundations of the Olympic lifting movements. Since then, he went on, spent a lot of time doing CrossFit, and now he's back in the Olympic weightlifting space and is one of the top British Olympic weightlifters in, I think, the 89 kilo class. Now, this is going to be really cool because we're going to take a look at his technique today and see what we think. So I want to start off this video just by watching his lifting. This is from a recent competition he's competed in. We'll watch all 3 snatches, all 3 clean and jerks, and then I'll dive into what I see, and hopefully from this video there's going to be some tips and tricks that you guys can incorporate into your training. It's going to make you a better weightlifter too. Okay, so we start with 135 opener here, 297 snatch. Rock solid first attempt. Jump to 140, again, pretty standard increment. I think this is a comfortable weight for him. Again, great consistency, super easy lift. 144. Yeah, I like it. Just as good as the first one. Looks comfortably like a snatch 150. Let's move on and take a look at clean and jerk. Now, this opener was ropey. There's a few things that I see straight away on his clean and jerk, which I'm going to dive into in a minute. It's clearly the weaker of his 2 lifts. I think when I first snatched 140, I was clean and jerking 180. Okay, 160 was actually better than the 155, and then 165, modest final attempt. Yeah, clean was actually easier again than the 60, and a little bit ropey with the jerk. So absolutely awesome for him to go 6 out of 6 in a competition. I think that's incredible, and again, more than anything, consistency on the snatches straight off the bat, absolutely incredible. Clean and jerk, a couple of things there. It's obviously the weaker of the 2 of his movements, but let's first of all see why his snatch is as good as it is. Okay, so I'm going to fast forward this video right through till his final attempt, because like I said, above anything else, one thing I noticed straight away from Craig is the consistency across his snatch. Now, generally people with the frame like he has, which is slightly longer, shall I say, and quite long-limbed, especially with the arms, are always going to find snatch a little bit easier. Let's talk about setup. There's a couple of things here that, I don't know, I wouldn't normally suggest someone doing this setup position, but it works really well with him. One thing that you'll notice is when we're setting up with the bar, there's a little bit of internal rotation with the shoulders here that happens at the start. This makes it more challenging generally for most people to set their chest or keep the chest up in the first phase of the lift. You'll also see that it looks like he's very slightly driving his knees out in this first phase of the setup, which is fine. Obviously works really well for him. Above anything else, they don't collapse during the first phase of the pull, which is really good to see. As we start pushing the floor away with the legs, one thing I want you to notice that happens is a little bit of shifting of weight in the foot. Again, this is likely due to that pushing out at the start, pulling a little bit into the toes or to the weight to the outside edge of the foot during this first phase of the lift. You'll see a lot of great lifters that do this. It's not affecting his ability to snatch this weight, as he does it really well, but it's just something I want you to pick up on here. As we transition past the knee, something that Craig does extremely well during this middle phase of lift is keeps the bar nice and close. You see how the bar's staying almost touching his thighs during this middle phase of lift? Really important for you to be able to strike up straight, but also be patient during the extension phase. You'll see his shoulders are staying directly above the bar, which is really good, but some people would argue at this point there is a slight bending of the arm. Now, like I said, I believe this comes more than anything from the way that he sets up at the start. And a lot of the time when people do have an arm bend, it's more evident in his cleans. It comes from the way that you set up. Some people have slightly hyperextending elbows. Some people don't have hyperextending elbows. But nonetheless, in the setup position, if the shoulders aren't set back and down and the inside of the elbow isn't turned out here, sometimes that can cause us to pull when it gets heavy with a slightly bent arm. And this, if we come back to the start position, you'll see is kind of what's happening when he's setting up with his arm into the inside edges of his elbow. Whereas if anything, I think if he lengthened and took his head a little bit further to the ceiling and turned a little bit here inside the elbow pointing forward, it'd set his lats slightly better, which may help him through the middle phase of the lift. Like I said, the capacity I think that he has to snatch is way in excess of 150 anyway. Could he snatch 160 with these changes? I don't know. He'd have to give it a go and see how it felt. Sometimes it can be quite challenging to get lifters to change fundamental things like this, especially when he's at the standard that he's at. But again, it would pay big dividends, I think. Again, this is really, really good what's happening in this final phase of the lift. You'll see that Craig's staying on flat feet for a really long period of time, all the way till the bar's nearly at the hip. This means that he maximally utilizes his leg extension here through this middle phase. Now, this is absolutely textbook in terms of good use of the legs through this middle phase of the lift. Like I said, here you can see now that's exaggerated the arm position that I was talking about here, where they look a little bit bent. Maybe a little bit more of this feeling, so inside of the elbow showing and hands pushing down at this point would maybe help him keep his arms a little bit longer, but overall I don't think it's affecting what's really important here, which is the extension of the leg. You'll see here, and this is something that I like to see, good extension at the ankle, knee and hip. But also, you'll see how his hips are finishing just in front of his shoulders. I like to see this at the top phase of the lift. It means that the legs have done as much as they can. As long as it's not too excessive to the point where the head's throwing back. I don't think his is at this point. There's a small amount of space that's been created between him and the bar at this point, which is fairly normal during the turnover phase of the lift. And he's in a position where his feet have moved out into the catch position really nicely here and made a nice amount of space for his hips to sit between the ankles in the lowest phase of the catch. In the receiving position, things that I want you to notice, eyes are staying up, which is really good, looking straight ahead. He's got great thoracic extension from that long torso here, and his knees are tracking over his toes, so he's staying on nice flat feet. You'll notice here, if I zoom in on the wrists in particular, the wrists are sat back, and we're seeing this lovely external rotation here at the shoulders in the receive position, which has a huge benefit to lockout strength and stability. As Craig stands up, utilizing his legs, he maintains that exact chest position from the catch here, all the way to his top position, with only a slight stepping forward from the bottom. Overall, in review of Craig's technique, lots of things that I like about it. Slightly unconventional setup position, in my opinion, but works really well for him. Above anything else, I think discipline through the middle phase of the lift is really good. He spends a lot of time, I've seen in his training, doing work from hang and work without straps from hang, which allows him to get super strong in his grip, which can help you keep the arms relaxed better through the middle phase of the lift and stay super patient. So I think that's probably a great element of his training. A little bit of instability in the receive position in the overhead. It's kind of slightly more evident in the clean and jerk than it is the snatch. Would potentially benefit from some stability and strengthening exercises like socks press, like overhead squats for multiple repetitions, just to develop a little bit more of that foundational strength in the snatch. But from a pulling aspect and extension aspect, really, really good, super consistent. So lots of great lessons to be learned from this initial video. Let's move on to the clean and jerk. Okay, so let's start off with having a look at this initial clean and jerk at 155, which was his opening attempt. Like I said, quite a light opener in my opinion. I don't know the ins and outs of this competition or why he started so light, but nonetheless, we'll take a look at it because this was probably the worst of his 3 lifts that we saw from the clean and jerk. Now, one thing I wanted to touch on just from the setup position again was how the arms are bent around the knees in the setup position. I'd much rather see in the setup the arms are locked straight to create as much distance between the head and the bar at this point when we're moving from the floor, because what you'll see happens, right, is if the arms are bent in this first phase of the pull, when the bar starts to come above the knee, you'll still see this slightly bent arm position here during this middle phase of lift, which can cause sometimes the athlete to sit back behind the bar and flick during this extension. And now you'll see how this affects the timing of his clean. Even though he caught it super high, the front rack position, not ideal here. So I feel like if we can start in this setup position with the knees slightly closer, toes a little bit straighter, hip position is probably quite good, but the arms locked straight and the shoulders set back and down, he'd engage a little bit better through the lats, which I think would really help him through this turnover. Extension on this clean you always see slightly shorter extension on a clean than you do on the snatch. Like I said, the actual bar height here that he gets to is ample for him to be able to receive it based on his mobility, but the timing was just a little bit out. Looking at this position in particular, Craig's got great range of motion in his lower body. Again, you can see how those feet are nice and wide and the knees sat forward in this lowest point. But what you'll see happen with his front rack is he doesn't maintain a full grip on the bar, which is something that I always advocate for, especially for timing of the clean. And in addition to this, you'll see how the elbows have come together in the receive. He gets away with this because he is so upright in his receiving position. But if the elbows come together, the muscles in the upper back tend to relax, and this can cause you to fold in the receiving position. He's very lucky because he's very strong from a front squat standpoint. So even if he doesn't catch the bounce, he's going to be able to stand out from this dead stop position. But again, I believe Craig's clean and jerk potential is way down on where it should be based on where he's snatching and based on where his leg strength is. So I think some tidying up on this clean would help him. The full grip would definitely help him and allow him to stand up out of this clean nice and easy. He gets away with having the clean not be that good because his legs are strong, but it could also play a huge part in why he finds the jerk difficult, because he's burning excess energy in the clean. You can see this because as he stands out this clean, he actually has to take his little step forward here into this position. Let's have a look at the jerk. Feet are a little bit wider than I would suggest we'd want them to be in the setup for the jerk. I'd probably narrow the feet very slightly for him. What you'll see happens is when he dips a little bit rushed, the bar's floating on the shoulders a little bit here during this dip, which can affect the timing a little bit of the dip, but nonetheless, the knees track really nicely over the toes. In the dipping phase, the feet stay flat. The torso stays upright, so a lot of good things still happening there. As we get into our drive position here, bar stays in contact with the shoulders all the way through extension of the legs, which is really good to see. And as he receives the bar, his front foot doesn't travel as much as I'd probably like it to, and his back knee gets very close to the floor. So I try and get him to think about staying a little bit taller in the jerk. Something like power jerks as an accessory movement and push press would be really good for him so that he doesn't sink too low in the receive. I always think about trying to meet the bar at its highest point when I'm doing a jerk. It still allows me to get my hips underneath, but that can be super helpful. Final thing again, which I think is a result of the slightly wider feet than we'd like in the split position. If you watch the way the front foot moves, it travels in here because of the wider feet, and this one goes back. This puts him a little bit off balance in the receiving position. So I think narrowing up the feet and then aiming a little bit more diagonally for Craig would be super helpful for him to feel a lot more solid in this jerk. Let's move to his final one, because the 165 I think was really good, which was a heavier lift for him. You'll see again the arm position in the pull on this bent in the setup. Again, there's a little bit of loss of tension caused in the pulling phase as the hips rise a little bit early. Other than this backwards trajectory of the body, which comes from that setup position, I believe, height's still really good, and he's such an explosive athlete that he gets great amount of height here on the bar, which is really good to see. A little bit of gap being created here between him and the body. Like I said, because the weight's in the upper body, he gets this flick happening through the middle, which is causing the body to shift backwards a little bit, in my opinion. If we had the arms look straight, chest and pushing, I think that he'd come to the bar a little bit better through the middle phase of the lift here. Timing of the clean's good, catches it nice and high, the foot movement out here is good into the receive position, stays super close in turnover, and he lets the bar out into the fingertips. This causes a little bit of loss of tension here in the receive position. You can see the knees kind of shake inwards. That will cause the lower body or the lower back sometimes, or butt to tuck a little bit in the receive of the clean. Again, strong legs drive him through out of this, absolutely no problem. The foot's coming in right, so you see what he does here. If you watch what happens with the foot and the hands, he brings his foot in his hands at the same time. What I always suggest to get a much better movement of the foot and a much better set position is do the hands first and then the foot second. That way you could take a much more substantial step in through the middle part of the lift, which would help him get those feet a little bit closer and stop the crossing of his feet. Throughout the dip and drive, the extension's really good again. But again, I see this instability and twisting coming from the back foot now is turning in and the front foot's turning this way. If the knees get close at this point, the glutes switch off, which is where the main stability is coming. For what we actually want to see happening when he's splitting is if this was to happen, so the feet, if they start like this, right? So we'll make this cross. And we'll say that this is Craig's feet in the start. If he was to aim a little bit more diagonally like this with the feet, he's gonna create a wider base underneath the bar, which is great. But also from the front on, if this is his shin, right? And this is his foot, and we'll put yellow, this is his knee. It's important that the knee stays directly above the foot in the catch position. Whereas you can see here on this bit here that the knee actually starts to sit a little bit inside the foot, and this will also affect stability as well. So I think keeping the width between the knees and the receive position would also be super helpful. Guys, I'm going to round up there. I hope you found that useful. It's great to look at Craig's lifts. He's been doing incredibly well with his weightlifting and making progress super fast, so I'm ecstatic for him. I know you guys love him, so make sure you give him some love and support on his journey in his Olympic weightlifting. All in all, some really good foundations, considering he hasn't actually been doing weightlifting that long, and with a couple of key tweaks with his natural ability as an athlete, he could go a long way. There's no reason why he can't snatch in excess of 150, and with some changes to his clean, I believe that 180, 190 would come into play based on his strength. Guys, if you enjoyed this video and you want me to do a technique review of you, do not be afraid to shoot me a message below or hit the link where you can book in a consultation call with me. We can talk about your lifting and how I can help you with my online coaching and training at the Lifting Zone. In addition to this, there's all an array of training programs as well as our TLZ subscription that's available on the website for just $5 a month. You can train alongside me and my team and get expert technique support and help through the Lifting Zone app. Guys, that's it for me. If you enjoyed this video, don't forget like, share, subscribe, and share, and go and watch some of my other technique reviews I've done of all these amazing athletes, which I'll put up a link to here.